I don't know. I just don't know. How do you answer something like that? You know, if I was the government, I'd have the guy in the slammer for a long time.
Rory Calhoun was Hollywood's rugged leading man, the tall, handsome cowboy who rode alongside Marilyn Monroe and charmed audiences for decades. But behind that polished image was a past so dark that his own agent eventually used it as currency in one of Hollywood's dirtiest deals. What Calhoun revealed about his life wasn't just shocking. It exposed a system that protected some stars while sacrificing others. From armed robbery to a betrayal that should have ended his career, Rory Calhoun's story is a masterclass in survival.
As you know, in this business, next week it can change. You can be 12 or 15.
Let's uncover the dark truth he finally had to face. In 1955, Rory Calhoun was at the peak of his career. He'd just starred opposite Marilyn Monroe in 2 films and was becoming one of Hollywood's go-to leading men. Then, without warning, Confidential magazine, the most notorious scandal sheet in America, published a bombshell exposé with a headline that essentially read, "For the grace of God, still a convict, Rory Calhoun." The article laid out everything: the armed robberies, the car thefts, the years in federal prison and San Quentin. Details that could destroy any actor's career were now splashed across newsstands for 4 million readers to consume. But here's the twist that makes this story so disturbing. The information didn't come from investigative journalism or angry ex-associates. It came from his own agent. Henry Wilson, the man who discovered Calhoun, renamed him, groomed him, and built his career, had voluntarily handed over every dark detail of his client's criminal past to Confidential, and he did it to protect someone else, Rock Hudson. Confidential had been offering a $10,000 bounty for proof that Hudson was gay, information that would have destroyed his career in the 1950s. Hollywood Wilson, who also represented Hudson, needed to make a trade, so he threw Rory Calhoun under the bus. Wilson actually sacrificed 2 actors that day. He also exposed Tab Hunter's 1951 arrest at a gay party. But Calhoun's story was more explosive, more detailed, and designed to be the kind of scandal that would satisfy Confidential's appetite while protecting their more valuable asset. The truly remarkable part? Calhoun's career didn't collapse. In fact, the scandal barely dented it. The revelations only solidified his bad boy image, making him even more appealing to audiences who now saw him as a genuine tough guy rather than just another pretty face. But that doesn't make what happened any less of a betrayal. And to understand just how dark Calhoun's story really is, we need to go back to where it all started.
Those 3.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, people just talk too darn much for my taste. Yapping about this and that when they ought to be eating, working, or sleeping. I mean, what's anybody say that everybody doesn't already know anyway? Can you tell me that?
Francis Timothy McCown was born in Los Angeles in 1922, but any hope of a normal childhood disappeared almost immediately. His father, a professional gambler, died when Francis was only 9 months old. His mother remarried, and Francis sometimes used his stepfather's last name, Durgan. But the new family situation wasn't the stable home a kid needs. According to later accounts, Francis tried to escape beatings from his stepfather, leaving home at 17. But the damage was already done. By age 13, he was already on a path that would define the next decade of his life and almost prevent him from ever becoming Rory Calhoun. At 13, Francis stole a revolver. That single act sent him to the California Youth Authority's Preston School of Industry Reformatory in Ione, California. Preston was no ordinary juvenile facility. It was known for its harsh conditions and military-style discipline. For most kids, spending time there would be enough to scare them straight. Francis escaped. He managed to break out of the reformatory's adjustment center, essentially the jail within the jail, and he never revealed how he did it. Once free, he didn't go home. Instead, he escalated. He began robbing jewelry stores, stealing cars, and eventually made the mistake that would change everything. He stole a car and drove it across state lines. That made it a federal crime. When he was caught, Francis Timothy McCown, still a teenager, was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison at El Reno Federal Reformatory in Oklahoma. This wasn't juvenile detention anymore. This was real prison, with real criminals, and a skinny kid from Los Angeles had to figure out how to survive. According to the confidential article that would later expose him, Calhoun got into a fight with a gangster at El Reno, sending the man to the hospital. For that, he was thrown into solitary confinement, the hole, for 8 days. After serving his federal sentence, he was transferred to California on other charges and ended up at San Quentin State Penitentiary, one of the most notorious prisons in America. He was paroled just before his 21st birthday. By that point, Francis had spent a significant portion of his teenage years behind bars. Most ex-cons struggle to find any legitimate work. For someone with his record, a career in Hollywood should have been impossible. But somehow, impossibly, that's exactly what happened. After his release from San Quentin, Francis McCown worked a string of rough jobs that suited an ex-con with limited options. He worked as a cowpuncher in Arizona, a lumberjack in California's redwood forests, a hard rock miner in Nevada, a forest firefighter, a truck driver, a mechanic, and a fisherman. These weren't careers, they were survival. Then came 1943, and a horseback ride that sounds too perfect to be real. The story goes that Francis was riding in the Hollywood Hills when he encountered a man who struck up a conversation. The man asked if he was an actor. Francis said no. The man asked if he'd like to be in films. Francis, probably thinking it was a joke, likely didn't take it seriously. But the man was Alan Ladd, already a rising star, and his wife, Sue Carroll, was a powerful Hollywood agent. Whether this chance meeting happened exactly as the legend suggests doesn't really matter. What matters is that Sue Carroll saw something in this rough-around-the-edges ex-con and got him a screen test at 20th Century Fox. His first role was a one-line part in a Laurel and Hardy comedy called The Bullfighters, where he was credited as Frank McCown. That tiny credit caught the attention of someone at a party the Ladds hosted shortly after, David O. Selznick's assistant, Henry Wilson. Wilson was already becoming legendary in Hollywood for a very specific talent. He could take good-looking young men with marginal acting ability and turn them into stars. His stable of clients included Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, Guy Madison, and eventually Troy Donahue. Wilson had a gift for manufacturing marketable leading men out of raw material. When Wilson saw Francis McCown, he saw potential. He signed him to a contract with Selznick's company, Vanguard, and immediately set about transforming him. First came the name change. According to one account, Selznick suggested Rory because you're a Leo, Leos are lions, and lions roar. The surname options were Donahue, Calhoun, or Callahan. Francis chose Calhoun, but Wilson didn't just change his name. He fixed his teeth, coached his walk, adjusted his voice, taught him social manners he'd never learned, dressed him in expensive clothes, and controlled virtually every aspect of his public persona. Wilson's grooming process was invasive, meticulous, and effective. For Rory Calhoun's first public appearance, Wilson orchestrated a publicity stunt that would generate immediate buzz. He arranged for Calhoun to escort Lana Turner, one of Hollywood's biggest stars, to the premiere of Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound. In 1945, Wilson specifically told Turner to wear white fur to create a visual contrast with Calhoun's dark suit and black Irish features. The photos of the glamorous blonde and the mysterious handsome stranger created a sensation. Suddenly, Rory Calhoun, who had spoken exactly one line on film, was being talked about all over Hollywood. It was manufactured fame, but it worked. However, there was a darker side to Henry Wilson's mentorship that wouldn't become public knowledge until years later. Henry Wilson's methods for building stars came with strings attached, strings that many of his clients would later describe as exploitation. According to multiple accounts, Wilson demanded intimate favors from the young men he represented in exchange for career opportunities. It was Hollywood's open secret, the flip side of the Me Too movement that nobody wanted to discuss. Former clients and Hollywood insiders later confirmed that if you were a Henry Wilson client, you probably had to intimately express yourself to Henry. As actor Tony Curtis once put it, Wilson maintained tight control over his clients' personal lives, even dictating who they could date and marry. When Calhoun became engaged to French actress Corinne Calvet, Wilson vetoed it. The relationship was ended because Wilson decided it wasn't good for Calhoun's image, or perhaps because Wilson wanted to maintain control. This level of manipulation extended to all of Wilson's major clients. He orchestrated Rock Hudson's marriage to his own secretary, Phyllis Gates, purely as a publicity shield against rumors of Hudson's intimate affairs. But Wilson also delivered results. Under his guidance, Calhoun's career took off. He appeared in Adventure Island, The Red House with Edward G. Robinson, and That Hagen Girl with Shirley Temple and Ronald Reagan. By the early 1950s, he was starring alongside Hollywood's biggest names. His breakthrough came with Way of a Gaucho in 1952, which established him as a legitimate Western star. He followed it with a Song in My Heart alongside Susan Hayward, a film that became his personal favorite. Then came How to Marry a Millionaire in 1953 with Marilyn Monroe, Betty Grable, and Lauren Bacall, and River of No Return in 1954 with Monroe and Robert Mitchum. Rory Calhoun had become exactly what Henry Wilson promised, a bankable leading man. And that's when Wilson decided Calhoun was expendable. In 1955, Confidential magazine was closing in on Rock Hudson with a $10,000 bounty for anyone who could prove he was gay. Hudson was on the verge of becoming the #1 box office attraction in the world. Wilson couldn't let that story break. So he made a calculated business decision: sacrifice a less valuable client to save his most important one. Wilson fed Confidential every detail of Calhoun's criminal past, details that only an agent with intimate knowledge of his client would know. The exact charges, the specific prisons, the fights behind bars, everything. When the story broke, Calhoun did something that shocked Hollywood. He confronted it head-on. Instead of denying or hiding, he publicly acknowledged his past before Confidential could fully exploit it. He owned the story, controlled the narrative as much as possible, and essentially dared the public to reject him. They didn't. If anything, the revelations made him more interesting. Audiences saw him as authentic, a real tough guy, not just another manufactured Hollywood pretty boy. His career continued without missing a beat. But the betrayal by Wilson marked something deeper. Calhoun now knew exactly how disposable he was in Hollywood's machinery. He'd been used as a bargaining chip by the man who was supposed to protect him. And while his career survived, that kind of betrayal doesn't go away. After the scandal, Calhoun made a smart decision. He stopped relying on other people to control his career. In 1957, he formed Rorvik Productions with his partner Victor Orsatti and began producing his own films. He co-wrote, produced, and starred in The Hired Gun, Domino Kid, and Apache Territory. Adult westerns that gave him creative control and a bigger share of the profits. In 1958, on the recommendation of Desi Arnaz, Calhoun launched The Texan, a CBS Western series that he produced and starred in. At the time, most film actors refused to do television. It was considered a career-ending position, but Calhoun saw it as an opportunity. The show ran for 2 years and solidified his status as a Western star. Throughout the late 1950s and 1960s, he maintained a steady career in both film and television, appearing in everything from Gunsmoke to Bonanza to Death Valley Days. He worked consistently, made good money, and seemed to have escaped his past. But there was another dark side to Rory Calhoun that never quite went away. His personal life was chaos. Calhoun married Lita Barone in 1948, and they had 3 daughters together, Cindy, Tammy, and Lori. But the marriage was a disaster from the start. Calhoun was a serial philanderer on an almost comical scale. When Barron finally filed for divorce in 1969, she named Betty Grable and 78 other women with whom Calhoun had engaged in adulterous relationships. 79 women in a divorce filing. Calhoun's response to the accusation became legendary. Heck, she didn't even include half of them. It wasn't a joke. While still married to Barron, Calhoun had an affair with actress Bettina Marcus that resulted in a daughter, Athena Marcus Calhoun. In 1966, Marcus filed a paternity suit against Calhoun. Both actors were married at the time. The case was settled in Los Angeles Superior Court for an undisclosed sum. Athena would later become known as the world's most beautiful showgirl and received the key to the city of Las Vegas in 1987. But the circumstances of her birth reflected the pattern that defined Calhoun's personal life. He couldn't or wouldn't control his impulses. After his divorce from Barron was finalized in 1970, Calhoun married journalist Sue Rhodes in 1971. They had a daughter, Rory Patricia, but that marriage also fell apart, and they divorced in 1979. Remarkably, they reconciled and remarried in 1982, staying together until his death. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Calhoun continued working steadily, but in increasingly minor roles. He appeared in low-budget projects and made numerous television guest appearances on shows like Hawaii Five-0, Starsky and Hutch, and Fantasy Island. He was offered the role of J.R. Ewing in Dallas, but turned it down because he felt he was playing too many villains. After Larry Hagman became a massive star in the role, Calhoun deeply regretted that decision. From 1982 to 1987, he played Judge Judson Tyler on the CBS daytime soap opera Capital, which gave him steady work for 5 years. His final role came in 1992 when he played rancher Ernest Tucker in the film Pure Country. At 70 years old, he was still handsome, still working, still trying to stay relevant. But time was running out. By the late 1990s, Rory Calhoun's body was breaking down. Decades of smoking had left him with severe emphysema. He'd also developed diabetes, and the combination of the two conditions was devastating. His once rugged physique grew gaunt. His breathing became labored. The man who had spent his youth in prison and his prime as a Hollywood leading man was now facing the reality that his body was failing him. On April 18, 1999, Calhoun was hospitalized with advanced stages of emphysema and diabetes. For 10 days, doctors tried to stabilize him, but his condition continued to deteriorate. On April 28, 1999, Rory Calhoun died at Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, California. He was 76 years old. So what was the dark truth of Rory Calhoun's life? It wasn't just that he'd been a criminal as a teenager. Plenty of people overcome difficult pasts. It wasn't just that his agent betrayed him for Rock Hudson. He survived that scandal and even benefited from it. The dark truth was that Rory Calhoun spent his entire life being used by people who saw him as a commodity. Henry Wilson groomed him, controlled him, exploited him, and eventually sacrificed him to protect a more valuable asset. Hollywood studios used his image and marketability without caring about who he actually was. His own destructive behavior, the affairs, the inability to maintain stable relationships, the self-sabotage, suggested a man who never fully escaped the trauma of his early years. In a 1959 interview, Calhoun admitted something revealing. "I liked the money it brought in, and I felt it would be nice to go back to forestry with a neat bankroll when these fellows found me out. I never had any feeling I'd make good." Even at the height of his success, he saw himself as a fraud waiting to be exposed. He never believed he deserved what he'd achieved. That kind of internalized shame doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from years of being told you're nothing but raw material to be shaped, controlled, and used. The ultimate dark truth is that Rory Calhoun survived prison, survived Hollywood's exploitation, survived public scandal, and built a career that lasted 5 decades. But he never escaped the feeling that he wasn't good enough. He never truly believed in Rory Calhoun, the Hollywood star. Deep down, he was still Francis Timothy McCown, the kid who stole a revolver at 13 and spent his teenage years behind bars.